So as I was thinking about these readings today and also the readings last week, it seems like the Lord is wanting to give us a theme that keeps coming up over and over again. And it's really the theme of trust. And it's the theme of having a new way of looking at things. St. Paul would even say it like this: be transformed in the renewal of your mind. And if you remember last week, we talked about these two different dramas, these two different worlds that we could enter into. One of them, the one that revolves around ourself, and the other one, the one that revolves around God, the ego drama, the theodrama, the great commandment of me, or the great commandment to love God with everything. And it seems like it's the same thing that's popping up here as well, because in this week, we have this call to trust, but to go from one world of the way that we thought trust was, and to go deeper into that to discover a whole nother level of trust. And it's only in that recognition that we are out of alignment, and when we get into alignment, then there is this explosive grace, peace that can come. And that's where the Lord wants to lead us. He said that, I came that you might have life, and have it to the full, have it more abundantly. And so a principle that I want you to think about as we go through these texts is this: only when, or unless we give ourselves over to another power as our base layer, as our foundation, we will always be out of control. We'll always be off balanced. But when we surrender to the other, we go under his control. I'm going to say that again. Unless we give ourselves over to another power, we will always be out of control. But when we surrender ourselves to that other, we become under his control. Do you see what's left out in the midst of that? I'm in control. Notice how that doesn't fit into any of the equation. And that's that original lie, that I have to take matters into my own hands because maybe God is not going to be there for me. And I have to grasp the apple because maybe I'm going to miss out on something. Or maybe he won't provide for me, so I have to control. I have to take things on. But the moment we go into control mode, we actually find ourselves off balance, out of peace, and we're not really able to experience this deep control of someone else supporting us and being our base layer. And I experienced this in two different ways recently. One of them, which was a little when it was a little more warmer, was floating in Lake Michigan. Just think about when you float. Maybe when you were a child and you were learning how to fly, to float. As babies, we're natural floaters. We lived in the water. We were literally under the sea. And yet, when we're born and we start living out in this world, little by little, we start to become afraid of the water. And have you ever had that experience when you're first starting to learn how to float and you go back? Don't you try to flail and you're trying to control, you're trying to tread water and kind of keep like this, but when you do that, you find yourself off balance, you start sinking until you get to a point where you truly surrender to something beneath you, the buoyancy of water, and you realize a surprise, that it's when you try to be in control that you sink. When you surrender to the other that's actually underneath you, lifting you up, then you experience his power. And you experience the ability to float. Another experience that I had was recently with horseback riding. And now I'm going into this world of bareback riding. And it's actually a lot of fun, but it's a little spooky at the same time. But there was a moment in which I was realizing that I was out of alignment, and I thought that I was straight and that I was secure, but I was actually leaning forward and not even realizing it. And my instructor kept telling me to lean back a little more, not all the way, but more than what I thought. And then she started to say, because I was holding on to the mane, she's like, okay, put your hands up in the air like that. I don't have a saddle. I'm just on this horse. And now we're going to just go a little faster and faster. And we're going to trot. Now we're going to canter. And we're just going to go around and around and around. And I kept trying to be in control by kind of leaning forward. But I was getting myself off balance and almost falling off. So I had to trust in what my instructor was saying, is to lean back a little more so that I'm on my pockets. And there's this moment there in which I stopped fighting and kind of trying to control the motion, but I entered into it, and there was this powerful moment of just this true oneness. And there was such comfort and security, no matter how fast I was going, without a saddle and without any reins, just putting my hands up in the air, that I could control the horse and actually just be perfectly content that way without falling off. Both of those experiences remind me of what's being said here. When we give ourselves over to another power as our base layer, then we become under his control. But if we keep holding on and trying to have control, we actually find ourselves out of control. And so let's look at what's being said in the readings today. You have these two widows. And the widow in the New Testament has 2 coins. And if you think about it, if she gave one of them, that's 50% of all that she has. That's amazing. But notice how she's not content with that. She takes both. And she lays them down. And the Lord says this. He calls the people and he calls his disciples and he says, look at this poor widow. She put in more than all the other contributors of the treasury. They were contributing from their surplus wealth. They had money bags, but they were still in control. But she, from her poverty, has contributed all that she had, her whole livelihood. That word livelihood, another way of translating that is her whole substance. And that's really important because if you think of the word substance, it's the base layer. It's the ground. And she, in a sense, gave over her ground to allow someone else's ground to be her support. She was able to lean back and allow the power of buoyancy, the buoyancy of the creator of the stars of heaven, to be her strength and support. And she found peace in that way because she realized that she was laying back into the hands of the one who created those grains that made the flour and the olives that produced the oil. And we talk about this widow, this other widow, who also gave of her substance, but it's this experience of her needing to be put into alignment first. Just like when I was on the horse, I thought that I was straight, but I actually was in a situation where it'd be very easy to fall off. So a lot of times we think that we're in a trust situation, and yet what the Lord wants to do is he wants to challenge us in that trust in such a way that we have to truly depend on him, not with just one coin, but with both coins. And notice what this widow goes through in the first reading. It says this: Prophet Elijah, who already the Lord has said, I'm sending you to this widow in Zarephath, and it's there you're going to be fed. So he's holding on to that promise. He's laying back onto that promise, and that's giving him the strength to be bold. Because he then goes and he sees this woman who's picking up sticks. He calls out to her, please, bring me a small cup full of water to drink. And it says she left to get it. So she had that. She might not have had lots and lots because it's a drought, but she had that. She could help in that way. But notice there's another thing that she gets stretched in. She goes to get it, and then the prophet Elijah calls out after her, and also, please bring a bit of bread. And she actually stops in that moment. Have you ever had that experience where you're being called to some sort of generosity, and it is a stretch, but you're like, okay, I can do that. And then all of a sudden, there's something else that comes up, and you kind of stop, you kind of freeze, and you're kind of like, wait, this is really out of my comfort zone. That's what the widow's experiencing. Because she stops and she looks and she says, sir, I promise you, as the Lord lives, I don't have anything baked. There's only a little bit left. And in fact, I was just going to collect these sticks here. We were going to make one meal for me and for my son. And then we're going to die because we don't have anything else. Do you see how she's like, this is impossible. I can't be generous in this place. And notice what Elijah says. He says the words that Christ says to us so many times. Do not be afraid. He says, go and do as you propose. But first, make me this little cake and bring it to me. Then you can prepare something for yourself. Do you see the stretch that's happening there? He's saying, don't be afraid. But surrender this situation to trust God. Because in doing that, you are, in a sense, laying back onto the hands of the one who created the grain, who created the oil itself. And if you step forward in faith, the jar of flour shall not go empty, nor the jug of oil run dry, for as long as you need it. Give us this day our daily bread. And it says that she left, and she did as Elijah had said. And she was able to eat for a year. And Elijah and her son as well. And the jar of flour didn't go empty. The jug of oil did not run dry, as the Lord had foretold, as he promised through the prophet Elijah. This is what the Lord wants us to hear today. Because maybe there's a part in your life right now in which you feel like the widow, in which the Lord is calling you deeper, and you're able to go this far. And you're like, yeah, I can do this. And then he's like, but give me this bit of bread. And you kind of stop. You get paralyzed because you're like, Lord, I can't do this. This is impossible. There isn't anything here. And the Lord wants to say, don't be afraid. When we flail, when we try to be in control, we sink. And the only way that we experience the power of what God is capable of doing in our life is by falling into grace. Are you willing to take that leap of faith? That's what the Lord is calling us to. He wants to lead you to life-giving streams, but he's calling you to fall back into grace. Do you have the courage to do that? The place we get filled with the courage is here, because this is where the Lord makes his promise. I am the bread of life. Whoever eats of this bread will not be hungry, will not be thirsty, and even if they die, they will live. And the Lord says to us, do you believe this?